In the world of business, some decisions are just bigger than others. But picking who you work with, your supplier, your partner, that might just be the biggest one of all. You get it right, and, well, you succeed together. But if you get it wrong, the whole system can come crashing down. So how do the smartest companies out there avoid a total disaster? Well, let's break it down. Think about, I don't know, anything you own. Your phone, your car, your coffee maker. It's the end result of this long, incredibly complex dance between dozens, maybe hundreds of companies. But here's the thing. This system, it's often surprisingly fragile. So what happens when just one of those links in the chain snaps? The consequences? They can be absolutely catastrophic.
To really get a handle on the stakes here, let's rewind a bit, back to 2011. A massive flood hits Thailand. Now, that's a terrible natural disaster on its own, but its effects, they reached way, way beyond the floodwaters, and they ended up crippling one of the world's biggest industries. The domino effect was just immediate. Warehouses for the major hard drive suppliers were completely flooded. And all of a sudden, PC makers thousands of miles away couldn't get the parts they needed to build computers. Think about that. For months, a single flood in one country created an operational crisis for the entire global computer industry. It's a really painful lesson in just how interconnected and, yeah, how vulnerable our supply chains really are.
Okay, so this all leads to a really crucial question. If your whole operation is only as strong as its weakest link, how on earth do you make sure you pick the right partners to begin with? How do you spot those hidden risks before they bring your company to its knees? Well, for decades, companies have basically relied on a pretty standard checklist to make this exact decision. It's logical, it's straightforward, but as we're about to find out, it might also be dangerously incomplete. Okay, so on the left, you've got the traditional big four: cost, quality, deliverability, and service. Makes sense, right? But the case study we're digging into, which comes from the super fast-moving semiconductor industry, says this is just dangerously outdated. They add two absolutely critical factors: technology and productivity. In an industry where innovation is literally everything, these aren't just nice-to-haves. They're about survival. So you have to wonder, by focusing only on those traditional 4 points, are companies creating this massive blind spot? Are they totally ignoring the very risks that could sink them in a crisis? And this brings us to a really powerful shift in perspective. Instead of just looking for a partner's strengths, what if you started by systematically, intentionally looking for what could go wrong? There's actually a name for this method. It's called Failure Mode and Effects Analysis, or FMEA. But the core idea is brilliantly simple. The best way to think of it is as a pre-mortem. You literally start by imagining the partnership has already failed. It's a total disaster. And then you work backwards to figure out all the potential things that could have caused it. Now, this isn't just some vague thought experiment. You can actually put a number on the risk. For every potential problem you can think of, you ask 2 simple questions. First, how severe would this failure be? A 1 might be a minor delay, but a 4 could be a complete factory shutdown. Second, how likely is it to even happen? You rate each one on that simple scale, and then you just multiply them together. The result is a single, really powerful number, a final risk score. And that, right there, is the magic of this method. All of a sudden, risk isn't just a gut feeling anymore. It's a concrete number. It transforms this vague cloud of worries into a clear, prioritized list, letting you focus on the threats that truly matter. So, okay, that's the theory. But does this whole FMEA approach actually work in the real world? Let's take a look and see it in action with a really fascinating case study. So our story follows a semiconductor company. They're on the hunt for a new supplier for a really critical part, and they've narrowed it down to 3 candidates: Supplier A, Supplier B, and Supplier C. Their job is simple, but it's not easy. Pick the least risky partner. So the company ran the numbers. They put all 3 suppliers through this rigorous evaluation, looking at all their criteria. And the result? Well, it was not at all what anyone expected. But hey, before we get to the final answer, let's try it for ourselves. First up, we're just going to use the old traditional checklist. That's only cost, quality, deliverability, and service. Okay, so using just those 4 old-school criteria, Supplier C is the clear winner. It's got the lowest average risk score at 0.45. I mean, seems like a pretty easy decision, right? They look like the safest possible bet. But hold on a second. What about those other 2 factors we talked about, technology and productivity? What happens when you add them into the calculation? Everything flips completely on its head. Just look at this.
Supplier C, our winner from before, plummets all the way to last place with the highest risk score of 1.13. And the actual lowest risk partner, the best choice for the company? It turns out to be supplier B, who was only in second place before. It's a total reversal. I mean, this chart just makes the final result undeniable. When you consider all 6 factors, supplier B is by far the safest, most reliable choice. The old checklist would have led the company to make the absolute riskiest decision of the 3. That's pretty wild. So what in the world happened? Why did the result change so dramatically? It actually reveals a really crucial lesson about how we measure risk and how we think about value. So here's the kicker. Supplier C looked great on paper because they were the cheapest. Simple as that. But they were a massive risk when it came to technology. The very thing the old checklist didn't even measure. And for a high-tech company, weak technology isn't just a small problem. It's an existential threat. And this leads us to the powerful conclusion from the research. The goal shouldn't just be about finding the cheapest partner. No, the goal should be finding the partner with the lowest overall risk. It's a fundamental change from a cost-first to a risk-first mindset. And that really leaves us with one final question to think about. Whether it's in business or, just in your own life, when you're making those big decisions, are you actually measuring all the right things? What's the hidden risk, the hidden factor you're not even considering that could completely change everything?